Okami is a third-person action-adventure game where you take control of the very lovable doggo Amaterasu, who's on a quest to restore life and balance and all that good stuff in the world. I've heard a lot of good things about Okami. I never got the chance to play it when it first came out on the PS2, and man do I feel like I missed out. After playing through it all, I've realized just how incredible it is. I'm both sad and happy Capcom didn't go further with the Okami series other than Okami Den, which I never really played because it's on a Nintendo system. Fuck Nintendo. Sometimes games need to feel more like an experience rather than a franchise where you keep adding more to it, where you inevitably lose sight of what made the first so great and captivating. Kind of like how God Hand is a fantastic game, but I feel it can benefit from having sequels as it's more gameplay focused, whereas Okami is story based as the controls are pretty basic for the most part. We start off with a little backstory on the world and a legend that takes inspiration from Japanese mythology of the 8-headed serpent Orochi, and the chaos he brought to the land of Nippon, which is Japan, as well as the fall of Orochi from the swordsman Nagi and the white wolf, I'm going to be butchering this name now, Shiranui? I won't go into detail about the mythology, as I don't know too much about it, but the story of the game follows 3 arcs from what I can tell. First, you have the introduction to Amaterasu and Isen, where their main goal is focused on restoring life to Nippon, learning the celestial brushstrokes, and defeating Orochi alongside making Susanoo, the descendant of Nagi, fulfill his destiny of what is basically repeating history. The second arc is about the shadows that spewed after Orochi's death. This feels like the weakest arc as it's more focused on introducing other characters that are for the most part only present for this arc. So not much investment is there for me personally, but I feel this was the wise decision as it doesn't last too long. And because of how short it is compared to the first arc, it clearly shows it's more a way to flesh out the world. The third and final arc is unlocking Amaterasu and Isen's full potential. We learn more of both the protagonist's past, a village in danger of a demon, and a warrior who's taken upon himself to fulfill his destiny. Wait, that sounds a little familiar to the first arc, and you're right it is, but with a few differences. Susanoo didn't have any motivation to fulfill his destiny, in fact he was very against it, while Oki, in the third act, feels like it is his duty to defeat the 2 demons that are in a mountain close to his village. I'll be honest, there's not really much character development for that guy, but it's the last act and it's not really his story, so I'll let it slide. I really don't want to go into detail about the last couple hours of the game as it is spoiler central. Okami is more a hero's journey type story. You don't notice it early on, but by the end of the game you will be emotionally invested to it. Even though the dialogue from our protagonists are only from Isen, you can easily tell what Amaterasu is thinking and feeling. Sure, you get the joke postures because of how Amaterasu is basically just a fierce looking doggo, but the scenes that matter to the story are handled with care and convey to the player how you're supposed to feel. So how does Okami play? Well, for the most part, it's a third-person brawler. Not so much a fully fledged action game as it doesn't have some of the advanced combat prowess of something like Devil May Cry, but it doesn't need to. Okami tries something new and it comes in the form of being a wolf. No, wait. The Celestial Brush. That's what it is. Seeing as that's the main selling point of the game, aside from its gorgeous art style, let's talk about the Celestial Brush mechanic. More importantly, if it's a gimmick. Yes and no. Look at anything added to add uniqueness and it can be seen as a gimmick, but it's not a bad one. Especially seeing as it's so prevalent in Okami and frankly has to be. It is after all the main mechanic of the game and allows you to traverse the areas you go to as well as mandatory or just makes fights easier. Does this make it easy though? Not really. In fact, in the later stages of the game when you have all 13 brushstrokes, the game loves to test your knowledge, making you use one you haven't used too much, whether it be because you don't like using them or it's not needed. As an example, I'm going to refer to the Rejuvenation and Power Slash brushstrokes as they are both the first and second ones you learn. Power Slash gets used more often, it has more uses overall, both in combat and certain puzzles. However, you don't forget how to do the Rejuvenation brushstrokes as the game does a good job of teaching the player the patterns needed, plus the patterns aren't that hard. Sometimes this doesn't work as it should because if you don't connect a circle, it's not a circle, so instead uses up your last ink bottle to create winds, because that will help me in a combat situation. But that's a minor gripe, unless you literally can't make a circle, in which case sucks to be you I guess. With every game that has action and adventure as its genre, there's an upgrade system. But it's almost never needed, which I'm okay with, I'm perfectly fine with this. The upgrades are in 2 forms, the first being gold dust you can buy from certain merchants in order to upgrade your weapons from useful to slightly more useful. I legit cannot tell if it actually made any differences. There aren't exactly damage numbers or stats that tell you anything. The second is the dojo where you meet a man who can turn his head upside down and have a completely different look, which is kind of what you'd expect from someone who can do that, but that's beside the point. You learn new abilities from him, such as being able to piss on your enemies so they drop demon fangs, which are another form of currency, to your yen, and give you an extra attack in a combo. Speaking of demon fangs, they can be traded in for holy artifacts which are different to your divine instruments, which are weapons in Okami. There are 3 different types of weapons: reflectors, rosaries, and glaives. Each can be either a main or sub weapon, and depending on which slot they're in, they perform different actions. The reflector as a main weapon is a disc that Amaterasu throws as an extended arm, while as a sub weapon can be used as a shield where timed properly performs a counter attack that deals beast levels of damage. The holy artifacts you can obtain aren't really anything special. You do have a fire tablet which makes you immune to fire damage outside of combat, but everything else is kind of lackluster. There is one that lets you fast travel between the safe spots, but when you find it, it's from a vendor that's very near the end of the game, so it's only useful for people who are completionists, which I am not. Let's go back to the combat for a second, more specifically the boss fights. This is a Kamiya game, and he made the original DMC, which funnily enough was meant to be RE4, and now DMC5 is using the RE7 engine. Gotta love the way the world works. Anyway, back to my point, he's made games with bosses that stand out, and they most certainly do here. You fight against the bosses is not just a sign of your progress through the game, but also how much better you've become. You go from boss fights where you use Power Slash to using all 13 brushstrokes because of environmental reasons in the boss rooms. The final boss being a clear example of telling the player they need to use them, otherwise they can't progress. Unless you want to be lazy and use the exorcism slips that deal damage to all enemies and don't count towards how many hits they can take before they become immune to regular attacks. Now we go to where all the issues lie, because oh man, there are a few. PC specific, but there are a few. As I played Okami HD on the PC, and of all the problems we could have with a remaster of a game from the PS2 era, it ends up being a 30 FPS lock. I can think of a couple reasons why it's locked, but it's not something that we should be dealing with, especially for a game that looks like this. And I mean graphical demand, not beauty. I still think its art style it holds up. Kind of like how Shadow of the Colossus holds up on the PS2. Just not the controls. However, I'm disappointed it doesn't have mouse support for the menus. Thankfully it does for the rest of the game, but for the menus, I mean come on. If you don't want us to free roam with a cursor, at least let us use a scroll wheel. Instead I have to use my keyboard. But the thing that really bothered me were the load times. These are console levels of load times. I loved Okami, and it's still installed on my computer. I'll most likely play it again once I forgot most of the story. It's that enjoyable. Would I change anything? Yes, but they're PC specific changes, nothing to do with the overall gameplay or story because I love them both the way they are. Story more though. I got emotionally invested and the final moments of the game almost brought tears to my eyes. I know, I should man the fuck up. Maybe one day I will. Anyway, if you were looking at Okami but unsure if it's worth the money, it's worth every penny. If you liked my review, hit the like button, comment and subscribe. I also have a Twitter and Facebook page, consider following them for updates on what's going on and what the review I'm working on for that week will be. Links in the description down below.